Hey guys, how's it going? Srey here. Today we are going to talk about Lily. And Lily is a special case we get to talk about because, as some of you know, I have a love-hate relationship with Lily. And this video is actually going to cover two builds for Lily. It's going to cover a support build and it's going to cover DPS build. Now, you might be thinking, Lily, DPS build? And some of you might be surprised by that, and some of you might find that as to be expected. Now, before I say anything else, do I think Lily is good? I think Lily is a fantastic double support. I think she's really good in double support, and I think she's awful in solo support. I would never pick Lily as a solo support healer, but I think that she's one of the best, if not the best, off support, kind of pseudo damage, pseudo healing hybrid. She has very good sustain damage, and a lot of, I guess you'd call it utility, but basically I'm talking about her blinds. So she can kind of adapt to a lot of situations, and she also hard counters a lot of heroes. So uh, Illidan, for example, is obviously very hard countered by Lily because of the blinds and sustained healing. So the counter to, like one of the counters to Illidan, as I said, is sustained, kind of out sustaining Illidan. So he prevented him from doing anything and out sustaining him. The other counters to him, of course, would be just CC locking him and killing him or burst damage and so on. So why do I not like support Lily? And why have I heard so many times in the past that Lily is a fantastic hero and a really good support? And why does that conflict with the competitive scene seeing virtually zero Lily play? And if she is played, it's only in the DPS build. Why is that? Okay, so let's just look at the core issue. What do you want from a support? When you have a sole support in your team, what do you want from the support? The support's job is to keep the team alive. Okay, so the way that Lily heals when she's in the main support role prevents her from keeping allies alive most of the time. And what I mean by that is, first, she has no hard CC. So if you think of Uther, if you think of Malfurion, if you think of Ariel, they have roots or they have stuns. So they are able to keep their allies alive through burst healing or stuns, or Malfurion, for example, has a lot of utility and just heals more outright than Lily does. So Rhaegar doesn't have any CC, but he's still a really good healer and he can keep his allies alive, and that's because he has burst healing. So his Q is burst, his W can shield, and his ult is a burst heal. All of these healing, which is her healing brew and her jug of 1,000 cups, is healing over time, and that can be bursted through very easily. So the reason she isn't picked is because the way that she heals is very sustained. In addition to that, she can't target her healing. So both of her heals, Healing Brew and her ultimate, or one of her heroics, Jug of 1,000 Cups, you can't target. It just prioritizes the ally with the lowest health. So a lot of the times you don't want to heal the ally with the lowest health because the ally with the lowest health might be well out of danger, and you might be needing to heal the person with even 3/4 of health who's about to get bursted by, an ETC Tyrande. And you can't target them with Healing Brew. The only way you can kind of pseudo target them is if you move Lily into a spot where only that target will get healed, and that's just not realistic. And in addition, and also her healing is a little bit delayed, so it actually takes a couple moments for her Healing Brew to actually, from the time you cast it, to hit your ally. And especially with her ultimate, that also takes some time to cast. So let's go on to her abilities. Her abilities are very basic, and none of them include any targeting whatsoever, except for Cloud Serpent. And the only thing you have to do with Cloud Serpent is click an ally, and that's it. So Healing Brew, you press Q, you heal the lowest ally, lowest nearby ally, and it prioritizes heroes. W, you point to click, and a Cloud Serpent is summoned, and it auto attacks nearby enemies, prioritizing heroes. It doesn't say that, but it prioritizes nearby enemy heroes over nearby enemies. Then Blinding Wind, it just prioritizes heroes again, and it hits the two nearest enemies and does damage and blinds them for 2 seconds. Her passive is if you get hit, you move 10% faster. So let's go over these really quick. Healing Brew does fairly good. If you break down the numbers, it heals for a fairly significant amount. Cloud Serpent, we'll talk about that last actually. Blinding Wind is very effective, especially when talented into it. It does quite a lot of base damage. 290 is not bad. And it also blinds enemies, so that's very, very effective against like Vala or Illidan, or even heroes that don't rely on basic attacks but still use basic attacks, so like ETC or Mirrodin. Like every hero in the game does a significant amount of their damage through basic attacks, except for maybe like Jaina or KT. That's only because they've been tuned down as mages to specifically do low damage from their auto attacks. And then fast feet just means that you can move constantly. So the gameplay style of Lily is basically you're always moving, you're always attacking, you're always casting spells, and you're always mobile. That's Lily. She is kind of vulnerable to hard CC and burst, but if you can't burst her, she's very difficult to deal with. Okay, I want to talk about Cloud Serpent here because a big reason that Lily sees such a relatively high win rate is because of her build choices and her ease to play. So you probably heard this before. Lily is very easy to play. All you have to do, as I said, is there's no targeting involved. You just press your buttons when you're near things and your abilities are casted. Now, there's still a difference between the good and the bad Lily, of course, but the, I don't want to say the bad Lily players, but maybe the inexperienced ones typically go Cloud Serpent build. What they do is, when we go into the specific talents, but they talent into Cloud Serpent, which is basically you just cast a Serpent on yourself and you have to do nothing. So before I talk about why that build is bad, just think about this. So Cloud Serpent lasts for 8 seconds, and in case you didn't know, I'll just give you some hints here. Lily attacks at 1.25 attacks per second, okay? And Cloud Serpent attacks at 1.25 attacks per second. So that means that it lasts for 8 seconds and it'll attack 10 times, okay? So what do you think does more damage? Do you think Lily's basic auto attacks do more damage per hit? Or do you think Cloud Serpent does more damage per hit? This may be obvious to some people, and it may not be obvious to others. So do you think it does? If you think it does more damage, the Cloud Serpent does more damage. How much more damage do you think it does? Do you think it does like 25% more damage, twice as much, or do you think it does less? Do you think it does 50% less damage? Do you think it does about even damage? So the actual results are these basic auto attack damage at level 20 at least is 138 damage per auto. Cloud Serpent attacks for 64 damage per auto. The Cloud Serpent tickles. Okay. So this proves 2 points. One, Cloud Serpent does very little, and two, you should always be auto attacking with Lily, even if she's a support, and that goes for any hero. You should always be auto attacking. I mean, I see people not even auto attacking on Vala, who is a very, very auto attack reliant hero. But even on supports, a large portion of your damage comes from auto attacks. This is kind of just a PSA that you should always be using your auto attacks to attack heroes, attack anything, to be doing damage. You should never just be walking around as Lily, just pressing QWE and just moving around. You should turn on minions here. You should be stutter stepping and auto attacking and trying to get the most out of your abilities. So you should be walking around. You should be stutter stepping like this, attacking everything as you play. And you're going to get a lot more damage out of your heroes. And that damage, trust me, adds up. Okay. So, why is the DPS build on Lily good? And what build should you be going for? Okay. First, I think it's more appropriate to talk about the support build. So if you're going Lily and you're going support, I don't recommend it. But if you're going support on Lily, you're going to want to take Conjurer's Pursuit. Lily is very mana reliant, and while I wouldn't recommend Conjurer's Pursuit if you don't go the support build, it is important to go because if you run out of mana as a support, you are completely useless to your team. And the fight stops when you run out of mana. So if you're DPS and you run out of damage, the fight can still go on because the rest of your team still does damage. But if you're the sole support, you're the only person that heals in your team. So it's very, very important to always have as much mana as possible, especially when you're playing Lily, who is going to have fights go on for a little bit longer than if you're playing like an Uther, because Lily's sustained based and Uther is burst based. If that makes sense. So you're going to want Conjurer's Pursuit at level 1. At level 4, you have a couple options. You can go Healing Ward for more sustain, Or you can go Mass Vortex if the enemy team has a lot of different auto attackers, or you can go Lingering Blind if the enemy team has um, like a couple heroes that are really auto attack reliant, so like an Illidan. So instead of the duration of the blind is increased from 2 seconds to 3 seconds, which is pretty good, honestly. A 50% increase is a lot. But you're also doubling. This is a 100% increase for targets hit. Generally, Mass Vortex is better than Lingering Blind, but generally Healing Ward is better than both of those if your Soul Support build. So this talent, Mending Serpent, heals you or heals for 48 time it attacks, and since it attacks 10 times, in one cast you're gonna get 480 healing at level 20, of course, from one cast. So the question is, do you get more healing from Healing Ward, Mending Serpent, Mass Vortex, or Lingering Blind? And the answer could be any of these could give more healing. It depends on what you need for your team. So if you just want a ton of sustain, you go Healing Ward. If one target is really being bursted, you can go Mending Serpent. If there's one target on the enemy team that does a lot of auto attack damage, then Lingering Blind might be better. And if the enemy team has just a ton of auto attacks overall, Mass Vortex is better. So this is one talent in Heroes of the Storm, talent tier at least, where any option could be viable. Again, this is for support Lily. Let's go Healing Ward. At 7, okay. This is where it gets a little fuzzy because Cleanse is obviously the better choice if you're playing competitive or you're playing a higher level or coordinated play. But let's go to Hot Slogs for a second. If we look at Hot Slogs here, this is all leagues, okay? Cleanse, not looking too hot, okay? Now let's go to search by Masters. This is for Hero League for Lily. Cleanse, still pick rate's a lot higher here when you search for just Masters, but the win rate is ridiculously low. Why is it so low when you have Cleanse? Why is it ridiculously low? Well, there's a few reasons for that. The first reason is people aren't good with Cleanse, okay? I made a post on this before, but the general knowledge in Heroes of the Storm is kind of low and mechanic skills kind of low, especially if you have a player playing only Lily or who plays Lily. His ability to use Cleanse or her ability to use Cleanse is if they're playing such an easy hero, they're probably not that good mechanically, so they probably can't use Cleanse effectively. Second thing is a lot of people pick Lily just because they don't have another support available. They don't play support, so they just play Lily. And if they take Cleanse, they probably suck with Cleanse too. Another reason is when you're bad with Cleanse, you focus so hard on using Cleanse that it actually detracts from how you play the game. So you're so focused on using Cleanse that it becomes ineffective. And the last reason is just because people don't know how to use Cleanse effectively overall. So it's not that Cleanse is bad, it's just that people aren't using Cleanse effectively. There is no way that you would, unless the enemy team has literally 0 CC, you would not take Cleanse if you were solo support Lily in competitive. But you probably wouldn't be playing Lily anyway because you shouldn't be taking Lily in competitive solo support. That's very, very, very niche. Go back to the game. Okay, so what should you take here? You're probably best off just taking the good stuff. You don't need Pitch Perfect because you already have Conjurer's Pursuit level 1, and you don't need damage because you're going support. So if you want to learn to be a top level support, being able to cleanse is mandatory. If you're just looking to play Lily and you just want to, or you don't need cleanse because they don't have a lot of CC or any CC, just go with the good stuff. Level 10, if you're going soul support, you go Juggle 1,000 Cups. I mean, you need the healing. 13, you can go Shrink Ray or you could go Surging Winds to go more healing, but generally you're just going to go Shrink Ray. There's no other options here. Elusive Feed is just not good. At 16, you're going to go 2 for 1 unless you go Shake It Off. Shake It Off, I'll go into a bit more in a minute when we go to the DPS build.
Ooh,
and at level 20, you're going to go Kung Fu Hustle because it's just more healing. Okay, so I'm going to go in more detail into the talents, but I want to go into more detail regarding the DPS build. So let's start over. Again, don't recommend playing support Lily. Okay, so here's when the real kind of review of Lily starts, because this is when you're actually going over talents that you might take in a game, because DPS Lily is actually really good. So when should you pick Lily if you're going off support? Well, if you already have a support, and let's say you have an Uther, you have basically anyone, Lily's good. It's not really dependent on what your team has, it's more dependent on what the enemy team has. So as long as you have some good damage in your team, you're fine to pick Lily regarding your team, and you have another support. when Lily is good versus the enemy team is when they don't have burst. So if they don't have like ETC Tyrande KT, insta kill comp, because Lily's gonna suck versus that. If they have more sustain, so if they have like, Avala, Lunara, Sylve, um, Illidan, double tank, sustaining backline, that's when Lily is gonna be better. So what should you take? Okay, take Gale Force level 1. Okay, so why shouldn't you take Timeless Creature? Why shouldn't you go Serpent build? Why does that build suck? Okay, it sucks because it doesn't do any damage. Okay, so first of all, what's the cooldown on Cloud Serpent? It's 10 seconds. How long does it last for? It lasts for 8 seconds. So you already almost have 100% uptime. Now, if you get the 50% increase uptime, it's going to last from 8 seconds to 12 seconds. So obviously it lasts longer than the cooldown is. So what does this mean? It means that if you want to cast it to get more efficiency out of it, you have to cast it on allies. So you want to constantly cast it on allies in fights. And you're going to have like 4 seconds more uptime, so you'll be able to put it on different heroes. Does this really do much more damage? No, because the base damage on Cloud Serpent is already so low. Okay, let's look at Gale Force. Gale Force is really effective not only because of the level 1 talent, or because of the talent itself, but because of the talent you get at level 4, which we'll cover in a moment. So 50% more damage. So the base damage on Blinding Wind is already 290. With 50% more damage, you're nearing 450 damage, 440. So that's a big increase. 440 on a AoE ability is a lot of damage, especially for a support hero. Support E hero, I should say. Protoss is just bad. You don't need the range. You have to be in range to cast Blinding Wind anyway. There's never really a time where all my allies are out of range, so we lose the fight. And you don't need Conjurer's Pursuit here because you just can't give up Gale Force because it's that critical to this build. So with Gale Force at level 1, and you can get Mass Vortex at level 4, or it doubles the amount of hits by Blinding Wind. Okay, let's do a little bit of math here. Okay, you get 50% more damage on Blinding Wind, and with Mass Vortex, you're hitting twice as many heroes. So normally, Blinding Wind is going to deal. It already takes that into account. Interesting. Let's reset the talent here. So normally it's going to do 290 damage times 2. So normally you'll get 580 damage out of the ability. Okay. So now if you take Gale Force, that's 290 times 1.5 times 4 because you're hitting 4 heroes, and you get 1740. So you get 1,740 damage. That is a lot of damage for getting 2 talents. And of course, this isn't all single target damage, it's spread out. But what's the point of picking Lily? What's the point of DPS Lily? Is to have high sustain. And with high sustain, is high damage, high sustained damage is good with high sustained healing. So Mass Vortex really accentuates the reasons to picking DPS Lily in the first place. You want to grind down the enemy team, heal your team up, and get them low overall. They're really wearing on their support's mana and their team's ability to heal all of the raw output of damage that you're dealing. So none of the other options matter here because Mass Vortex simply outputs so much more damage on the enemy team. Like getting these 2 talents like almost quadruples the damage. Like you do so much more damage with Mass Vortex. You can't not take this option. So the reason why you don't go Mending Serpent here. So again, this is going to heal for 480 damage because it hits 10 times and it's going to heal 48 each time. So 480 per cast of Cloud Serpent over 8 seconds versus being able to do an additional 1,000 plus damage on Mass Vortex to the enemy team. I just feel like the pros way outweigh the pros for Mending Serpent. Lingering Blind, you don't really want to go because again, the whole point of going kind of DPS Lily is to sustain the enemy team out, and this isn't going to increase your damage. This just increases the blind. And again, I didn't even mention the fact that you're hitting 2 more targets with Blinding Wind, so that's a total of 4 seconds of more blind overall that you're getting as well versus what this is going to offer. So these are the only options here in my. So level 7, if you're going off support, you don't need cleanse because your main support should have cleanse. Now you have a couple options here. You can go the good stuff or you can go pitch perfect. So as I said, you're not going Conjurer's Pursuit at 1, so pitch perfect can be good, especially if the fights are very sustaining. So this is definitely an option. Now it's going to reduce the cooldown or the mana cost of Healing Brew by a third, so from 30 to 20. You're casting it a lot, so it's actually a significant mana reduction. It only seems like 10, but you're casting it every 3 seconds. Now this isn't a 33% mana reduction overall, because obviously you have 2 more abilities, but it's still a nice decrease in mana cost that will be able to allow you to fight slightly longer. The other option is the good stuff. So the good stuff increases your healing of Healing Brew by 131 over 6 seconds. Now, the key part here is over 6 seconds. So the cooldown of Healing Brew is 3 seconds. So that means if you're healing the same target, it's going to overlap because the cooldown is 3 seconds and this lasts for 6 seconds. So if I heal myself, I'm going to get 3 seconds of the good stuff, and then I'm going to heal myself again, and it's going to overlap. So you won't get the full benefit out of the good stuff if you're repeatedly healing the same target. So if you're repeatedly healing the same target, it's going to give you about 15% more healing. Okay, but that's how the math works out. If you're not healing the same target, so you're swapping targets in between, you're going to get 30% more healing overall. I feel like 15 to 30% for one talent increased healing is a lot, and I feel like that makes it worth taking. I prefer this option here. Now, why don't I go Cloud Serpent? Okay, well, first, I didn't go the other two Cloud Serpent talents, so I wouldn't start now. But this does dramatically increase the amount of damage that your Cloud Serpent does. So it does 64 damage per 1.25 seconds per hit, and with this talent, it does 99 damage per hit in total. It does 99 more damage. So you're gonna be doing a total of 163 damage per lightning serp or cloud serpent auto attack instead of 64. That's a massive increase, especially when I just talked about the fact that you want to be wearing down your opponents, wearing down the enemy team and wearing on the enemy team's mana. That's a lot of extra damage. That being said, it's still only 33 damage per hit. I just feel like it's so low. Like 64 damage is just so low. It's less than half your auto attack damage, and I just feel like even though it increases it by so much damage, that it's still not even worth taking because of how little damage that Cloud Serpent does. And I feel like you're better off just going 15 to 30% more healing. Now, not to say that I would never take this talent, but I would only be taking this talent if I'm going for a super sustaining game, like very sustained. That's the only reason I would see taking it here. Okay, level 10. Even though you're off support, I'd still recommend Jug of 1,000 Cups most of the time. The only time I wouldn't recommend going Jug of 1,000 Cups, Water Dragon is not bad. It's very good. 40%, 70% slow for 4 seconds plus the 700 damage is insanely strong. And it's a 45-second cooldown. But I mean, this heals for so much. It's almost 3,600 health. It's more than Lily has her total health overall. So I just feel like this offers so much healing that it's better than Water Dragon. The only time I'd suggest Water Dragon is if you have literally no engage and your team lacks damage and they lack the ability to kill the enemy team, and that's when I would recommend taking Water Dragon. Otherwise, I think that Jug of 1,000 Cups is still the better option, even in a DPS build. I used to think that Water Dragon was better, but people just don't seem to cancel Jugs, so you just get so much value out of it. One thing I will say about Jugs is that you need to cast it before your team is getting blown up. As I said, Lily heals over time, so if you cast this ability late, there's a bit of a delay before it starts healing. I don't think I can actually cast it here until I take damage. You see that once I press R, it doesn't activate immediately. There's like almost a second in delay before you actually start healing from it. So this means that, especially when people are getting bursted, you need to activate this sooner. Note that this heals per second, right? This heals about 4.2 times more per second than Healing Brew. So if you're trying to think like maybe Healing Brew will save someone, Jug of 1,000 Cups will heal more per second. However, you can just pop Healing Brew before popping Jug of 1,000 Cups. And indeed, because this is a channeled ability, you should be popping all of your abilities before you cast Jug so that you have them back up once, or you have them back up a little bit at least once Jug finishes. Okay, so 13. Elusive Feat is bad. It's basically just block at level 13, which is bad. You have Hindering Winds, Surging Winds, and Shrink Ray. Shrink Ray is really good versus single hero carries an enemy team. You can't cleanse this. You can cleanse the movement speed portion of this, but you can't cleanse the attack damage or the hero's damage reduction portion. So if I cast this on Volley, for example, and their Uther cleanses Shrink Ray, they're still going to do 50% reduced damage. They'll just won't be slowed for 4 seconds. Now, Surging Winds is what I would generally recommend. This increases your damage and healing by 20%. So if you're fighting the enemies, right, and all you have to do is because it stacks up to 4 times, and you have Mass Vortex, which causes your Blinding Wind to hit 4 enemies, all you do is press E 1 time, and you have max stacks permanently. So this basically reads permanently heal 20% more and damage and deal 20% more damage. That's a pretty big buff, and that means that you heal for 20% more. That's a lot of healing, so it's very, very effective. The other option here is Hindering Winds, but I don't really recommend it. It is nice though because you can slow the entire enemy team, or almost the entire enemy team because of the extra because of Mass Vortex. And if you once you have Kung Fu Hustle at 20, you can repeatedly hit them. You can hit them. It lasts for 2 seconds, and the cooldown of Blinding Wind will be significantly reduced as well. So you have pretty high uptime on the slow. But I still recommend Surging Winds. 20% more damage and healing is really good. Okay, level 16. Serpent Sidekick is bad because as we already established, it does no damage. So this means that if both your servants are attacking at the same time, congratulations, they still do less damage than your auto attacks. Safety Sprint is bad relative to what the other options are. So 2 for 1 increases the number of allies healed by Healing Brew to 2, but increases the cooldown by 1.5. So what does this mean? It means you have 33% more healing on your Q, on Healing Brew. And that's overall healing. So remember, the good stuff, if you're not healing the same target repeatedly, heals you for 30% more. So 2 for 1 heals you for 33% more. Obviously, this stacks as well, so the good stuff works with 2 for 1. But basically, what I'm saying is the good stuff is really good, like relative to what you're getting at 16. But 2 for 1 is good if you just need more healing, or indeed if you don't need Shake It Off. So Shake It Off is really, really strong. It's so underrated. 50% damage reduction anytime you're stunned or root. This means if you see a Melfruit, you should walk into it because you're gonna get 50% damage reduction. That's so significant. That basically means you never die if they're blowing people up and killing them. This talent means that you basically are invulnerable. You can't die. The only way you can't die to auto attacks because you're just going to blind them, and you can't die to like KT because he's going to stun you before he chain bombs. So that means you're taking 50% less damage. So the only way you can get killed is if you're getting silenced or you are just really overextended. Like it literally almost makes you invulnerable. It's insanely strong talent if they have any kind of CC or roots. So level 20, obvious answer here is Kung Fu Hustle. It increases your cooldown reduction, or increases the cooldowns by 2.5, which is a huge amount. You're going to be spamming all of your abilities, and you're going to be doing a lot more damage, like more than twice as much damage. So this is the obvious answer. There's not really any other option. Even Bolt of the Storm, which is a great ability on any other hero, you wouldn't take because Kung Fu Hustle is just so good. It's one of the best level 20s in the game. It's I get nothing to even compare it here to, so I won't even bother going over. So that is Lily. I hope you learned something. I hope you understand why I don't like Lily in Hero League unless it's double support. But like people never know how to play that. I've seen literally maybe like 3 or 4 Lilies in my whole Hero League career that have appropriately gone the correct talents, and we've won because of it. Every other time they go Cloud Serpent build or they go support build, and it just doesn't work. And that's why Lily has a bad reputation, but she's not a bad hero. So I hope you learned something, and until next time, take it easy.